Hey everyone, we just finished reading about the gold rush yesterday and how California has now become a state in 1850, and it is now the 31st state. And now we are getting ready to learn about the Oregon Territory. So I'm going to share my screen. I'd like you to read along with me. We're on page 142 of your history book. And let's finish our chapter here. So, the Oregon Territory. Meanwhile, Americans had become greatly interested in the land called the Oregon Territory. This land would include the present states of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, as well as part of Montana and Wyoming. At the time, the Oregon Territory was owned by both England and the United States. They both agreed to be joint owners of the land, which at the time even included part of Canada. If you have ever traveled in these states, you know what beautiful country there is to see. Pretty sure that Natalie's mom is from Montana, if I remember correctly. So hopefully you probably have some good memories of that, Natalie. You might then ask, why did it take so long for the Oregon Territory to be added to the United States? Perhaps it was because it involved a long, dangerous trip to get there. The Oregon Trail was almost 2,000 miles long, stretching over wild country and hazardous mountains. Before Oregon could be settled, someone had to see it to know how rich and beautiful it was. Then, someone had to travel all the way back to the east to tell people how wonderful the Oregon Territory was so that pioneers would be persuaded to come. Missionaries were among the first to travel to Oregon. They were interested in teaching the Indians. The most famous missionaries to Oregon were Dr. Marcus Whitman and his wife Narcissa. They worked hard to teach the Indians, and they worked hard to bring pioneers to Oregon. During one winter, Marcus Whitman traveled back east to tell people about Oregon. When he returned, he brought several pioneers with him. Slowly, people back in the East heard about Oregon. To make this journey, Oregon bound pioneers traveled to Independence, Missouri, where the Oregon Trail began. Here, they waited until enough pioneer families came to form a wagon train. All of the families had to work together to make the 2,000-mile journey a success. Each man would be needed to keep the wagons repaired and rolling on their way. Each man would be expected to defend the wagon train in an Indian attack. Many pioneers would die of sickness or be killed before they reached Oregon. By 1845, thousands of pioneers had been successful in reaching Oregon. It became clear to both England and the United States that there would have to be a boundary line dividing Oregon into British owned land and American owned land. In 1846, an agreement was reached giving us the border between Canada and the United States that we have today. In 1859, the state of Oregon joined the United States. The state of Oregon did not include all of the Oregon Territory. Later on, Washington and Idaho also became states. Okay, so 9 years have passed since we just talked about California to now the Oregon Territory. And imagine what that was like, you guys, traveling from the east, which was, 13 colonies, or even the Northwest Territory that we've talked about, like Ohio and Michigan, all of those places, and then traveling all that way, 2,000 miles to the Oregon Territory with your wagons, your family, all of your belongings. You'd have to go through mountains. You'd have to possibly travel where Native Americans were that were not always friendly. So it was quite a trek. And people came because they wanted to explore a new land, and also because people were coming back from there saying how beautiful the territory was. So let's go ahead and take a look at our notes. And we'll just fill out this top section, the Oregon Territory. Which states made up the Oregon Territory? Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. That was considered the Oregon Territory. You should take a look at the United States map and see Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, just so you can have a visual of, oh, that was the Oregon Territory. Okay, next, why did it take so long for the Oregon Territory to be added to the United States? It was a long, dangerous journey to get there. So it took a long time, um, and that's why it took so long for it to be added as one of the United States. The most famous missionaries to travel to Oregon were Dr. Marcus Whitman and his wife, Narcissa. Narcissa. Pause the video if you need more time. And in 1846, an agreement was reached giving us the border between Canada and the United States that we have today. And in 1859, the state of Oregon joined the United States. Thought it was really interesting that we jointly owned this territory with Europe, because that's just an interesting concept, isn't it? To think that, oh, I wonder how we thought we could all get along and actually co-own this property. But in 1859, it was no longer owned by England, and now it is part of the United States as one of our states. All right, that's it for today. I'm actually going to do one more lesson and we'll end the unit tomorrow. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and make sure pause the video if you need or go back to fill out the notes. Okay, bye guys.